Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the #AdStudents podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing all things influencer marketing. So stay tuned. Okay, so let's kick this podcast off with the first question. So, I want to know, do you think influencer marketing is an effective form of advertising? Katie?
I think it can and it can't be. I mean, obviously, that's a very vague answer to give because it's sort of saying yes, but also no. I think it depends what audience you're going for, because I think you definitely need to go for more digitally versed audience. That like if your target audience is more digitally versed, then yeah, it's probably going to be more effective if you use influencer marketing because you're directly targeting people who are more online, and then obviously you've got to break that down to different target audiences within online communities. I do think it can be very effective. I think a lot of consumers now are becoming a bit more cynical about it, because if they see someone's advertising something, sometimes they switch off or they purposely ignore it. I know I do that sometimes because I think, oh, they're only promoting something, this isn't exactly genuine. I think sometimes if something's gifted, it can be a bit more believable because it's something that they've been gifted. They don't have to make a post about it. They've chosen to make a post about it because they liked the product that they were gifted.
Yeah, no, I agree. But for me, as soon as I see #ad in the post description, the integrity of that review or product showcase completely disappears, because I know that it's not a genuine review, or they're not showcasing this product out of will. You know that there's some kind of financial or gifting incentive behind it. So for me, it kind of loses integrity. So I don't necessarily trust it as much. Not to say that I don't think influencer marketing can be effective. I agree with you, Katie. I think it can. But for me personally, as soon as I see #ad, the effectiveness of the post or whatever it might be kind of
Makes you want to purposely ignore it.
I just kind of think, well, it's sponsored.
It's not genuine. It's something that they're being paid to do.
Yeah, that's kind of how it comes across. I mean, it might be genuine. They might genuinely like the product that they've been sponsored, but again, they've been sponsored, so it's kind of like, I don't know. Henry, what do you think?
Well, this is an interesting one because personally, again, I'm going against the hive mind here, but I personally think that influencer marketing, when used correctly, can actually be a really good means of promoting your products to consumers. Now, obviously, I think for influencer marketing to actually be successful, I think that you've got to work out your correct target audience. So, say for example, I'm a company like Gymshark, one that specialises in athletic sportswear. What you're going to want to do is like, you're not going to use gaming or beauty blogger type influencers. You're going to want to pick people with large audiences who kind of either they're known for being like an athlete or something, or they're in, say, the fitness community.
Yeah, the product needs to make sense for the person who's promoting it.
I think there are lots of different types of influencer marketing as well, aren't there? So I know there's obviously the format where influencers they receive just an outright sum of money. So that can manifest in the form of, give us, we'll give you £300 and you promote the product to your audience on your Instagram. Well, that's fair enough. I think another one is affiliate marketing as well. Yeah, so I follow my link, and for every purchase that you take, I get, say, 10% of the profits.
Yeah, see, I think that those kind of links where it's traced to how many clicks, sort of like the pay-per-click, the PPC thing works, I think that's a lot cleverer for marketers to use, because obviously advertising and marketing companies were paying huge sums of money to influencers to promote their product or service, and then not necessarily being able to measure the success rate coming back to them. And obviously that's a really sort of like bad road to go down, because you're putting all this money out and you actually have no idea what effect it's having, if any, and if that effect is positive. So I think the pay-per-click thing is definitely a lot better, because obviously advertisers know where their money's going. It's sort of like you get, for example, if you got like 10p per click, I don't know if that's an accurate example, but if you got 10p per click and you get like 1,000 clicks, then that's good for the influencer and good for the marketing company, because they're paying for exactly what they're getting back.
Yeah, I agree, because I think one of the main challenges with influencer marketing is that measuring the ROI can be really difficult. And I kind of agree with you. I think that perhaps a better way of tracking, because we know that it can be difficult, I think a better way of tracking might be through monitoring stuff like social mentions and direct website visits based on like a kind of like geographic time series. So when the post has gone out, and so you can, because the website visits, how are you going to tell that it's it's exactly from that influencer? But if you can kind of put it geographically into perspective, it might be a bit easier to measure the ROI.
Yeah, there have to be like some sort of KPIs in place, because I know that, and this is actually another reason why I think affiliate marketing is a very good idea. It's because, as I said, some companies, they pay, say, a Love Island contestant, but they pay them £2,000 to do a series of Instagram posts. Like, they're not going to put much effort into it, are they? Like, do you remember the ladies from Avon who spoke to us on Student Takeover Week?
How could I not?
Yeah, well, they were talking to us about influencer marketing, and they mentioned a case where an unnamed Love Island contestant, I think they received a fee to promote something on their social media, and they copied and pasted like the entire kind of page to actually put into their bio. Yeah, and it included like brackets, mention this brand.
Yeah, it wasn't in their bio, it was for their Instagram story. So what they did is that they said, oh, what kind of thing do you want me to write for this Instagram story? So they sent an example, not expecting the Love Island contestant to copy and paste that and post it directly onto the Instagram story without reading it. And it said, it said something in brackets that wasn't supposed to be there. It was more a note to, or it was like, no, it said put this in your own words, I think it said. And she posted that up there, and it had been up for, I think they said 10 minutes when they found it. And obviously they had to call her straight away and get it taken down. But yeah, I agree, Henry, like that's sort of like a really good example where it goes wrong.
Yeah, and I'd say the reason that went wrong, and why one-time payments with influencers can go wrong, is there's no incentive for them to kind of promote it. Like, they've got the money for it. Whereas with affiliate marketing, it actively encourages you to go the extra mile, encourages you to write, kind of make a brilliant kind of business pitch to your audiences.
I think like a really good example of that is that marketers and advertisers are becoming a lot smarter when it comes to working with influencers, because you get like these massive influencers with like 1 million followers on Instagram, probably more than that, and they are paying out this huge sum of money for a target audience to get to a target audience, when actually marketers and advertisers have realized that if they spend smaller amounts of money on lots of different micro influencers, then with around 10,000 followers each, they can reach the same amount of their target audience, probably more effectively, because it's smaller influencers that they're working for, so it's smaller communities which are probably a lot more tight knit, and they get better value for their money in that sense. And also smaller influencers, as we were talking to Charles Haynes from Ziggurat when he came in and gave us a talk, he said that smaller influencers are more likely to put in more effort into their content because they want brands to work with them again, because they are a smaller influencer. They want to build their channel or their personal brand, so they're going to put more effort into the work that they do. Whereas I do think when someone does sort of like shoot to fame, because all the brands want to jump onto that fame, they don't necessarily have to put in a whole lot of effort. I mean, obviously there are people who are big influencers and do put in a lot of effort to their work, for their work and the brands that they work with, but I do think there are the few that don't.
Yeah, like I think it's primarily like reality TV stars. It's like they come out of like a show, they get their 15 minutes of fame, get a bunch of brand deals. Again, don't really put that much effort into them, and then they're just kind of cast aside. And would you say as well with micro influencers that there's like a higher degree of trust?
I think so.
I wouldn't say a higher degree of trust. Maybe a higher degree of trust between the micro influencer and their audience, because as I said before, it's a smaller community. If they've spent a long time building that community as well, there's going to be a bit more trust, I think, between their followers and the influencer themselves.
Well, just going on what you said, I think in terms of trust, there's a need for trust to be developed between the agency and the influencer that's
Yeah.
working for them, as well as the influencer and their own target audience.
It's, especially if that influencer's not very experienced in working with brands or agencies.
Well, exactly, because when I was on placement, part of what I was doing was working with influencers, and in particular, it was children and parents working with children's toys, and we were doing influencer marketing through that, and there would be a very heavy approval process in which we would guide them, because they all had small followers at the time, and we would give them feedback on how they can grow their own channels, and what keywords to use, whether they should even be using keywords. And there was definitely a relationship between us as an agency with the influencer, so I think that's also really important. But just going off on what we've been saying, I think there is also an increased need for influencers in general to understand the regulations that are put in place. I think sometimes influencers can forget that there are advertising regulations put in place. I think that perhaps they could sometimes forget that actually it's an ad, it's not just like a review. So I've got a campaign example here. It's back from 2019, but it was part of Coco Brown's Valentine's Day campaign. So TV personality Olivia Buckland, she put up a post about a 1 hour tanning mousse, but she put hashtag brand ambassador in the post, but the ASA deemed that wasn't clear enough to their audience that it was a sponsored ad, and actually it got upheld. So do you think that there's a need for increased transparency from influencers? Or do you think, like the ASA there, for example, in this case, do you think the ASA is just being a little bit too overzealous with their rules?
To be honest, I think saying brand ambassador is very different, because some people are brand ambassadors and they'll be working with a brand all day and they'll just sort of do a post all on their own without being paid to do it, saying hashtag brand ambassador, and they might not necessarily be an influencer. They might just be a brand ambassador because they work for the brand anyway, and so they wear like the merch and things like that. They don't necessarily have to be an influencer to be a brand ambassador. So it's not clear whether someone's getting paid to sort of promote a product. So I do kind of understand why the ASA had that outcome for it, because I think saying something like hashtag ad is a lot more explicit and it's a lot clearer, and people are starting to understand a lot more what hashtag ad means, that hashtag ad means it's an advert, they're being paid to do that.
Yeah, because nevertheless, these influencers, as with every advertising institution, has a social responsibility not to mislead consumers materially. And I think that is probably, particularly within influencer marketing, a key challenge. Henry, what were your thoughts on that?
I think that, as Katie touched upon, there is a difference between brand ambassadors and influencers. Because brand ambassadors, they seem to be, at least to me, someone who's, well, as Katie said again, more kind of intimately involved with the brand. I think it's a bit of an interesting topic on disclosing ads, because I think, Katie, as you said earlier, if someone's just reviewing a product out of what seems like their genuine enjoyment from it, then obviously that's more likely to sway people, isn't it? But at the same time, it's also quite unethical if brands advertise that way. I'm pretty sure there are some ASA rules that state that obviously if you are promoting something, it has to be disclosed. So it can kind of almost seem like subliminal marketing, kind of circumventing the law.
Kind of stemming on that, I also think there's another key challenge, and I definitely found this on placement, is that there's a challenge with the integrity of some influencers with what they report back in terms of how much success their posts got. Like, how do you really know what their reach was, and what their engagement was, how many of their followers are real?
I suppose they'd have to prove it with like sort of like screenshots or showing their analytics if they measure it at all.
Yeah. I think I remember hearing this thing. It was about a year or two ago. I think a ex reality TV contestant. I think that she was actually found out that like 70% of her followers were fake. But there was no, there was another thing as well though. But I don't know if you guys heard about this, but there was a beauty influencer, and she was trying to promote. I think it was her own clothing line to them. She had something like 700,000 followers, and I think she only had 13 orders placed.
Ooh, that's got to hurt.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
got to hurt.
yeah,
But this is serious. This is serious for agencies that are investing in all of this money, assuming that they're going to reach 700,000 people to get 13
yeah,
orders. That would be devastating. What a waste of money. But it also shows why actually investing in smaller influencers, it's probably worthwhile. And like what you were saying, Katie, you're probably more likely to get more value out of it, because if you're investing in an influencer that has 600 loyal active followers, you're going to get more value than you are to somebody that has 4,000 followers, but actually only 100 of those engage.
And not just that, but those smaller influencers probably will put in more effort and more content because they want to, or they have to if it's their job, and they have a smaller following, and essentially they would have a potentially a smaller income because of that. They would have to do more to earn more, so they probably would put in a bit more effort than someone who has a very large following. They Someone who has a very large following might not put in as much effort because they have that large following, they have a constant, almost steady income for themselves. So they don't necessarily have to work with a brand. They have the choice to pick and choose brands a bit more.
whereas you're saying like the scarcity of brand deals makes people kind of more invested in them.
Yeah.
Now, I've kind of got a really interesting statistic here, and you've got to take this with a pinch of salt because it is from a blog. It's from Spark Taro. Probably pronounced that wrong. But they're suggesting that one of the problems of influencer marketing is that there's an overabundance of some types of influencers and there's almost nothing anywhere else. So what they're saying is there's kind of this strange phenomenon where 99% of influencers are either in travel, fashion, or lifestyle, and that's pretty much it. So what they're saying is, where are the influencers for small businesses, or where are the influencers for something like logistics or chemical engineering? And I kind of think that that might be true. Like, when do you ever see influencer marketing for those kind of products?
I suppose in those kind of areas, such as logistics, you would look more to industry professionals who could technically be called influencers, but because they are industry professionals, that they aren't considered that way. I suppose people would listen to them and pay attention to what they say because they have the backup of their career behind them for people to look up to, I suppose. But I do think things like gaming is like a massive influencer industry. Gaming is huge at the moment.
So do you think like influencer marketing is actually subject to specific categories? Because I agree with you, I could not see, even if it was for something like plumbing, I could not see influencer marketing being as effective as it would, from a reality star promoting a designer brand or something.
As you were saying, Billy, it's all about finding channels that have like large sustainable audiences. Because I'd imagine that your you're far more likely to find, say on YouTube, channels and influencers with upwards of 100,000 subs in beauty than in like industrial engineering. It's all about where people's interests are.
And to be honest, I think those kinds of things like beauty can be a lot applies to a lot larger audience. I mean,
Yeah.
From my experience, I believe that most, obviously not all, but most women wear makeup. Men also wear makeup. Makeup is a huge industry that people do on top of their everyday lives. So most women wear makeup every day to work. So they might not necessarily work for a beauty brand. They might work, as you said, in industrial engineering, but they wear makeup every day and they're interested in makeup just because that's something that they like to have, they like to wear. And so I think things like that, I think that's why the sort of like the beauty industry is a lot more successful, I suppose, when it comes to influencers, and there's more influencers, people are more interested in beauty influencers because it's something that is a part of their everyday life anyway.
So do you think it's more relatable to a wide audience?
Yeah. So it's sort of like the majority are interested in this one thing, whereas I think you get really niche markets in certain parts where you do get people. So you probably do have brand ambassadors for washing machines and things like that. So it really just does depend on what you're interested in.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think my statement by saying they probably don't have influencer marketing for logistical technology and whatever, they probably do. I probably just don't see it because I'm not interested in it. So there probably is stuff out there. So clearly there's a lot to talk about for influencer marketing, and I think that we'll probably do a part 2 of this in the future, because we've only just scraped the surface and there's a lot more to go further in depth with. But just to kind of sum up, I think we'll go with the main question that we discussed today is kind of, do you think influencer marketing is effective? So Katie.
I think it is effective as long as marketers and advertisers approach it cleverly. So as long as they potentially maybe go for more micro influencers and more of them rather than just one big payout to a much to an influencer with a much larger following, and making sure that they work with influencers who they know they're going to get a return of investment on with the content that they put out. And as Henry said about affiliate links and things like that, it's that they know that they're getting what they pay for, essentially. So yes, I do think it's worth it as long as marketers and advertisers approach it properly.
Heather, what's your opinion?
Ooh.
Heather.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Just thought I'd spice it up a bit.
Okay.
Cheeky.
In terms of influencer marketing, I'm on the same lines as Katie. Like, I think that provided companies do their research, they understand who they're working with, how engaged their audience is, and whether or not it's likely to generate any sort of financial returns or increases to profitability, I think by all means, go for it. It's just when you throw thousands of pounds at anyone with over 10,000 Instagram followers, then at that point it's a testament to burning money. Like if you don't do your research.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with both of you. I think advertisers do need to be wary of fake followers. Just because somebody has 100,000 followers doesn't mean they have 100,000 people engaging with their content. So sometimes you're more like you're better off money wise to go for people that have less followers but are more engaged. So I'm in complete agreement with both of you. And with that, my dear viewers, readers, listeners, fellow chums, is the end of episode 5, Influencer Marketing. Now, as I said before, we're probably going to extend this to a part 2 because there's just so much to cover. So I wish you all the best, stay well, and see you next week for episode 6.